Chapter 24, Winds of Change, Part 5. Emptiness was the only thing that filled the places where things like pride and accomplishment would sit within the Black Queen after slaughtering her enemies. Having just prevailed against the King of Clubs, I stood on the edge of the cliff, unsure of whether I wanted to throw up or fall to my knees in tears. As I looked over the piece of the vorpal blade that I still had possession of, the only thing I was certain of was that I was tired. I was tired of watching the land and creatures I loved dearly suffer so badly, tired of seeing them covered in each other's blood as much as their own, as they lay in the mud and grime that their beloved kingdom had become. I didn't give thought to London or what the afterlife held for me, but rather only that I wanted this all to end. I was ready for this dark day in Alice's Wonderland to become a distant memory. I listened to the sky gurgle as it digested its master, before realizing that the storm was changing. I could feel a shift in its direction, and watched as the eye approached me. Being the single target of an entire Jabberwocky army was a very sobering fact that made me remember that I wasn't alone atop that cliff. After a brief search, I found the White Queen lying where she had been the whole time. Upon reaching her, I tossed my sword to the side and knelt over her. A closer examination found her eyes and mouth to be closed, and her chest to be still. "Wake up, Your Majesty," I pleaded as I shook her, getting more aggressive with every failed reply. "Come on, stay with me." When the only movement I saw was the rain droplets running down her face, I forced back tears as my mind knew what my heart refused to admit. The White Queen was dead, making the king's earlier insinuation correct. It feels as wrong to say it now as it did to think it then. I think we can all agree that at this point, any other person would have admitted to themselves that they failed their mission. I, on the other hand, couldn't do that. While I can admit that I was running dangerously low on ideas, I had one left. I understood the risk involved, but I had to try. So as quick as I could, I left White's body and sprinted across the cliff to get the crystal rose. I thought the adrenaline I felt would be a hindrance. That was going to make me drop it as I returned to her, but little did I know it would serve a greater purpose. Before I could take a knee again, my ears picked up on the tail end of a strange whistling sound. It was accompanied by an equally strange pain that forced me not to a knee, but face first in the dirt. The pain began to burn as it rendered the leg it hit unusable, radiating throughout my entire body with the smallest movement. I needed to see what happened, so I bared my teeth and turned my head just enough to see an arrow sticking out of the back of my knee. The fact that I had no idea where the arrow came from horrified me, but the fact that I was now an immobilized target was worse. I made my best effort to drag myself, bum leg and all, closer to White while simultaneously looking for whoever shot me. I didn't make it far before I heard the whistling again. Expecting to feel the burning sensation somewhere else on my body, I was surprised to hear a voice call out my name. Out of thin air came the shape of the Cheshire Cat, who was somehow able to reach me in my time of need. With a leap, the cat came between me and the arrow at the last possible moment. I let out cries of both confusion and concern as I watched the projectile that was meant for me stick into the feline's side. Precisely at the point of contact, he fell to the ground, not far from me. "Chesh, no!" I cried, as I drug myself over to him. Petting his rain-soaked fur, I could only whisper his name softly as I frantically tried to think of a way to help him. The pain and struggle he was in still couldn't keep a grin off his face as he found me in his yellow eyes. "I think I can consider myself redeemed in the eyes of the Queen now. I'm a hero," he wheezed. His comment brought humor to the situation, but the longer I chuckled, the harder I choked on subtle sobs. "Oh, Chesh, indeed you are. You saved my life." I stroked the length of his body until I came to the wound. Then stealthily, I put a hand around the shaft of the arrow with the intention of pulling it out. "Now if we could just get this out of you, we could." His quick scolding stopped me dead. "No, Alan, leave it in. I'm of no use to you now, so don't waste your courageousness. Pay no mind to what happens to me. Remember that White is the most important. She's why we are all here. Don't give up on her. Leave me be now and end this." Chesh was right. No matter how hard I wished for the power to save my friend, I could do nothing for him. Our conversation had gone from whispers to hollering as we fought to hear each other over the storm. It had closed in on us. The Jabberwocky horde had formed a wall around the cliff, flying on a circular path. They gained speed as they went spinning around and round. When the entire wall flew at the same speed, it took the shape of a funnel. I could tell that in his own way, the cat was shocked by the size of the moving structure and the number of Jabberwockies that made it. While he took a second to marvel at it, I filled with panic, knowing full well what this represented. The rumblings of both Sky and the horde did their best to drown out Chesh as he called out, "The rose, Ellen! The rose's nectar must reach the Queen's lips. Now go." Following his urgency, I looked for the place I had left the rose and proceeded to crawl back to where I had been. Though the distance between White and Chesh was insignificant, the progress I was making against the elements of the storm was laughable. I had wasted a lot of precious time and conversation as I carried myself through the dirt. The consequences had shaken me to my core. I was now living in a vision of the past that I had journeyed through while in Wonderhaven. Only this time, it wasn't a vision. There would be no running from it, no snapping back to the safety of the time in which I belonged. The past was colliding with the present, creating a very real and frightening nightmare. Like a child, I clung naively to the hope that at any time now, I would open my eyes and trade this hell for the safety of my room. Unable to wake, I found myself to be an emotional mess as I finally reached White's body. Muttering words of encouragement incoherently had been a poor attempt at centering myself for what came next. I took notice of its failure when I needed to tilt her head back and open her mouth, only to feel hesitation in my hand. I was afraid to touch her, feeling that doing so would somehow defile this precious flower. "Forgive me, my queen," I whispered as I wiped the apprehension from my face before reaching out. After initially making contact, the rest of the interaction became simple. The softness I felt under my fingertips seemed to narrow my focus, eliminating the fear of my surroundings. Gently caressing her cheek, I laid a thumb across her lips and pried open her jaw. With the other hand, I slightly tipped the rose, sending its nectar, along with a prayer, spilling into the mouth of our beloved monarch. I nervously held my breath as I impatiently scanned for even the smallest hint of life within her. Instead of finding a miracle, however, I watched in heartbreak as a mixture of nectar and rain overflowed in her mouth and ran down her face to the ground. Wrestling with my composure again, tears ran as I did what I could to coax her into resuscitation. Okay, White, wake up. Come on, Your Highness, come back. Please. Please don't do this. They need you. You can't leave them. Please, open your eyes. Don't leave me. My eyes became foggy, making her disappear behind a sheet of blurriness as my begging turned into hysterical wailing. I'm sorry I failed you, I cried, burying my head in her breast. Hearing myself say those words aloud was sickening. But it was the truth. After coming so far, going through so much, the fact remained that I was too late. The Queen's passing from her suffering had put her beyond the reach of even the mighty crystal rose. Not to romance this tragedy, but laying there with her, holding her tightly as I cried, would have been an acceptable way to end my life. We were together, her and I, and as the will of both my body and spirit began to weaken, I wasn't going to leave her side. Though I barely had the inner strength to lift my head from her tear-soaked chest, I was going to be her protection from the horde that was inching nearer. I thought the idea of one last act of heroism against impossible odds, despite the poor state of things, was a miracle in itself. But what I witnessed just before that trumped it all. While trying to scoot myself within reach of my sword, I happened to grab White's rose necklace for support. That's when I saw it, two solid white eyes looking at me. I froze in utter disbelief that the Queen had opened her eyes. She was alive, resurrected by the crystal rose. Although she appeared to be the White Queen, the being behind those eyes wasn't the White I once knew. It was a powerful, godlike being, housed inside a gentle vessel. She said nothing as she began to float back to a vertical base, brushing me off as if I were weightless. My nudging aside didn't change the grip I had on the necklace, and as she rose, it broke free of her neck and gave me full possession. I laid paralyzed on the ground, alternating my gaze from the rose in my palm to the reborn Queen, who was now hovering upright. I remember being absolutely mystified that the woman, who had been gray and sickly just moments ago, was now adorned in a blindingly brilliant white light from head to toe. Her aura illuminated everything from ground to sky, making both the lightning and the rain disappear from sight. I imagined that from the outside, it looked like the funnel of Jabberwockies was working to contain a celestial divinity. With everything so heavily saturated in light, I had to squint to see Chesh weakly flopping his tail around. Happy to see him still alive, my new goal was to reach him. Needing to do so quickly meant that I would have to do something about the arrow lodged in my knee. I knew removing it was going to hurt, but it was vital. So, taking a lungful of air to hold, I gripped the shaft and carefully pulled it out. The pain was intense but brief, as I was able to ignore it, along with the bleeding. After watching the arrow turned to smoke in my hand. I left both the rose and the vorpal blade in the queen's place and proceeded to roll my way to my feline friend. "Chesh, are you seeing this?" I exclaimed, as I positioned myself behind him, putting the necklace in my pocket for safekeeping. "Well, it's rather difficult to see anything else," he purred sarcastically, while I carefully laid him across my lap. We were an audience captivated by what the rose had done. Although it would have been enough for us seeing the queen rise from the dead to stand fearlessly against the Jabberwockies, we were about to be treated to a demonstration of her power. At first glance, it appeared that rising of her hand out in front of her was meant to silence the raging beast, just as it seemed to the wind and thunder. The longer she stayed there, however, the more this theory was wrong. As the Jabberwockies swirled around us, violently calling out for their new challenger to make the first move, the queen gathered energy. From the center of her hand, a great white orb could be seen, getting bigger as it gained strength. Additionally, the magic she summoned began to change her ever so slightly. Excuse me. It materialized itself as a beautiful crystal crown made up of shards of all shapes and sizes, as well as the matching armor-like pieces that graced her shoulders. Until now, I hadn't seen white harm a living thing in any sort of way, nor participate in battle, but I suppose even the gentlest of creatures can be deadly when provoked to protect those they love. When the orb reached the size of a globe, she released it, casting it headlong into the wall of the funnel. I could tell by the nature of the collision and the reaction of the beast that it wasn't meant to be lethal. It was a warning shot meant to startle and disorientate. The flash affected the Jabberwocky synchronized flight pattern, causing the structure of the funnel to break down as they scattered to find safety in whatever darkness they could find. With the Horde's organization turning to mayhem, and calmness returning to uproar, the White Queen was starting to turn the tide. We could feel it, the sudden backpedaling of the enemy out of fear. Having them on the run, like she did, meant that she couldn't let up. Wasting no time before readying her next attack. Placing each hand near the opposite shoulder, objects that resembled lightning bolts filled them and were thrown out in front of her, traveling awkwardly through the air. Their landing would prove that they were more than met the eye. Rather than being bolts that electrocuted the monsters on impact, they adjusted themselves to the form of rhombus-shaped openings in the sky. The question of their purpose was anyone's guess, but the answer was beyond my wildest dreams. You'd probably laugh if I told you that the rationality of those odd holes actually serving as gateways between this world and another wasn't an issue. The part I was having difficulties wrapping my head around, however, was who came through them. I thought myself to be hallucinating. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the suspicion that each being I saw pour into the sky had a familiar face. Full minutes went by before I relinquished my doubt of what I was seeing. They were my friends, nearly everyone I had lost because of this dreadful war. The Queen had called upon Wonderhaven for reinforcements, which had been answered by releasing the wraithy remains of the Tweedles, the March Hare, and Dormouse, the Mad Hatter, and Alice. Starting as a sight for weary eyes, the return of the Knights of the White Rose wasted no time in becoming a brutal affair. Once intimidating roars were replaced with horrified shrieks as arguably what was the deadliest creatures in all of Wonderland were mercilessly butchered. The Black Royalty's army rapidly lost ground, having no way of defending itself against mystical spirits. The only strength it had left to play was its numbers. For every one that the little band of the dead killed, another took its place. Though I had no doubt that they could have kept this up all day long, and dare I say they even enjoyed it, White had seen her fill. Deciding to leave the cliff, she floated gracefully to the center of the battlefield, undeterred by the fighting around her. The dance of hacking axes and sword slashes happened in slow motion as the queen took her place as its centerpiece. Then, raising her hand again, she demanded its end. Like a pack of wild dogs yielding to their master, my friends abandoned their fun in favor of falling back around her. Together they watched and waited for a threat. But the Jabberwockies had little interest in attacking them outright. This intermission in the bloodshed allowed 3 more wraiths to fill the space behind White. It took some hard looking to distinguish that they were her sister and parents, who phased into sight, copying their relatives' raised arm position. I sat perplexed as to why the group seemed huddled together, frozen in midair. The horde wasn't going to attack first, but they were capable of rallying, so what were they waiting for? It was a stupid question to ponder, being that I answered myself. You see, the wraiths were far more than just friendly apparitions of the past. They were extensions of the Rose's magic. And with all 9 wraiths combining with her, the Queen's true potential would result in the final move in this apocalyptic chess game. Science teaches us about supernovas. A dying star whose gravity has become too much for it to bear, causing it to collapse on itself and explode. That's what I saw. White was a dying star, being crushed by the weight of the magic within her. When she closed both her eyes and her hand, she forfeited her internal struggle and her life. The explosion turned the wraiths into waves of energy that swallowed everything in every direction. Nothing was safe from the light, the darkness, the Jabberwockies, the card soldiers. Chess pieces, rather. The Jabberwockies, the chess pieces, they all were instantly incinerated as it purified Wonderland. Across the way, the Queen of Spades was losing everything. From the balcony of the castle, she helplessly watched the devastation. It was coming for her. She had lost control. With her magic worthless in saving her, she backed away from the railing, just to see her footsteps be eaten by the light. Knowing it was quicker than her, the only chance for escape was as futile as it was to somehow reach the armory door to perhaps be safe inside. She turned, taking her eye off the light and never made it. She only managed to reach her hand out for it before disappearing into the brilliance. Checkmate. Let me ask you, have you ever stopped to consider what it would feel like to be the last person on Earth? Likely not. Do you think it would be liberating or isolating? Do you think you would find peace in knowing that the world's suffering was over, or would you only suffer more alone? Well, let me tell you. In the few moments that I remained, there was no greater loneliness. I cuddled Chesh a little closer so neither of us would be afraid when the wave took us away. Listening to the cliff's foundation crumble as it surrendered to the light, I heard him softly whisper, "Goodbye, Alan." Sadly, there was no time for a spoken farewell. I responded by squeezing him tightly, burying my face in the scruff of his neck, and closing my eyes as we were both engulfed. I awoke to be greeted by white. Chesh and everything I knew was gone. There was no world, no Wonderland, only this echoing hollow of white. Was this death? Was I in some kind of blank purgatory as punishment for doing deeds too vile for heaven, but having a heart too pure for hell? The question of where I was soon coupled with what I was. I thought that if I could walk around, maybe I'd find some answers, but I had no arms or legs to move. I even tried my best to blink and couldn't. It appeared that I had been stripped of my earthly body and was energy or a representation of my soul. I was nothing, trapped in nowhere. Time held no power in this new place, which meant that I could have wallowed in my worthlessness for hours or even days without noticing. That was until I was interrupted by something peculiar. Just in front of me fell droplets from somewhere above. Not droplets of clear water, but of a black paint-like substance. Upon making contact with the white, as you might expect, they swirled around before running. Downward they fell until expanding to form a curious object. They became pictures, still frames, of all the beings I had met in the land that was no longer. The first droplet revealed the Duchess, holding her son, curse-free and happy in their own way. Next came the Black Royalty. Their expressions were stagnant and plain, as if they were bored of being there. The only life in the whole picture was the stare of disdain that burned in their eyes. After that I saw the royal family, mother and father, each embracing daughters who were in front of them. The most memorable thing about it was the expression on Red's face. There was no darkness in her. She was smiling. Holding her sister's hand in love and tenderness, for the first time in so long, the family was together, reunited forevermore. Finally came a picture of all my friends. Griffin stood in the very back, behind the Tweedles and Marchare, who, of course, had a certain mouse on his shoulder. In front of them was Hatter, with hands on the shoulders of Alice, who was holding a very smiley Cheshire cat. Oh, and we mustn't forget the White Rabbit, who stood beside her, fiddling with his pocket watch. That picture was worth keeping. All my friends, fitted with smiles, having not a care in the world. How I wish I could put myself there with them, sharing in the freedom of knowing that they put the worst behind them. So as pleased as I was looking at this moment, I scanned through the faces, feeling oddly incomplete. Someone was absent. I feared forgotten. Just as I pieced together who it was, I saw a small shape in the corner of my eye. I turned and found a very lost and indescribably beautiful butterfly fluttering around. Confused as to where this little creature came from and how it got to a place like this, I decided to see where he was off to. He didn't fly far, landing on the picture of my friends. It was strange. The closer I looked at the insect insect taking up residence on Alice's face, the harder it was to shake the feeling that I knew him. Epilogue. You seem troubled. Amidst the confusion rising on your face, I spot a question. If Alan perished in Wonderland, how is it that he was able to be here sharing his story just now? Well, the answer isn't nearly as complicated as the question. If you were listening, you'll remember that before we began the tale, I said that the journey showed me who I was always meant to be. The truth is the one you know, as Alan Little did indeed die on that cliff. He sacrificed his body and bared his soul in that place of white. That's where I found him, found myself, as the Mad Hatter. This really was the best scenario for him and I. He was so fragile and alone when I found him, quite torn up about what had happened. He was going on and on about everything, about how everything was gone and how no one believed him. The boy didn't make the slightest bit of sense, I tell you. But I could tell he was in a real pinch, so as any friend would, I offered my help. It's truly beautiful situation we have here. Now that I am him and he is I, we never have to be without each other, nor Wonderland ever again. It's all around you, everywhere you look. All you have to do is look beyond the edge of your imagination. Together, we are going to prove that it's there. Or is it here? Alan would want you to keep your faith in the impossible. While I can't say whether or not he will return from the dead, I'm quite sure he wouldn't want you to worry. I am the happiest I have been in an age. That's a far better souvenir to bring back than just this little necklace, eh? Now then, I suppose there's only one proper thing to do after concluding a story. Would you care for a cup of tea? Well, there you have it. Another book cover to cover. It was a doozy. I'm a little worn out after reading it. But now is a very exciting time because now we can wipe our eyes, we can get ourselves together and celebrate the fact that the next time that we get together to do this will be to start my newest book and to celebrate its release of the newest sequel and prequel to the Alan in Wonderland series, Wonderhaven. So now is the time that we can really get excited and look forward to that. So as always, I would ask that you let people know that we're doing this. If anybody's interested, let them know that all my books are here. So this is the time to get caught up before the next book, the newest book, gets released. This is the moment that I've been waiting for the last year and a half. So I'm super excited to come back and to celebrate that together. So until then, guys, we'll see you not only in the next episode, but with the newest book.